I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 168 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, and today we are getting organized with author Laurie Palau. As we start this year and recover from the holiday hurricane, as I like to call it, I'll bet that you are ready to be out with the old and in with the new. This is just the time of year when we get into this headspace where we want a fresh start. We want everything to be white and clean. We want to get rid of all of the holiday, and we want to have a place for everything and everything in its place. It is consistently one of the top New Year's resolutions every year. You know, if we're not tidying up with Marie Kondo, we're getting everything in rainbow order with the gals from the Home Edit. And so my guest today is Laurie Palau. Laurie is the author of the book Hot Mess, A Practical Guide to Getting Organized. She's the host of the popular weekly podcast, This Organized Life, and she's the founder of Simply Be Organized. It's a lifestyle company helping people live simply and work smarter. You have probably seen her advice in places like Real Simple and the New York Times, and she speaks frequently on the topics of clutter and parenting and entrepreneurship. So my kind of girl. Her Clutter Clinic is a nationwide workshop that provides strategies to help your organization or your team or your group feel more empowered to tackle the areas where they feel the most overwhelmed. She is a self-described homebody and a coffee lover, and she lives in Bucks County, Pennsylvania with her husband, Josh, their 2 daughters, and their dog. So let's welcome Laurie to the show. Well, Laurie, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
So before we get into all of the organizing wisdom that you're going to drop on us, I want to hear what your day looked like today. What did you do today?
Today was actually a really fun day. So it is my podcasting day, which I love. So before this, I recorded 2 episodes for my show, one of which was my 200th episode, which was like a big deal, like cue the
awesome.
confetti. So that was really fun. And then I recorded another episode with a great guest on a series that I'm doing all about clutter and the Enneagram. So it was super fun. I don't know if your audience is into the Enneagram at all, but it's a lot of
I am. I don't know about everyone listening. Yeah, I love it.
Oh, what's your Enneagram type?
3.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. My husband's a 3.
Yeah.
I'm an 8.
An 8, yes. I read that in your bio. Super fun. So you got to do an episode about that. And then what do you have planned for this evening? You celebrating your 200th episode?
No, I'll probably celebrate it when it goes live.
There you go.
But yeah, not too much. My daughter and I are binge watching something on Netflix, and we have like 2 more episodes to finish. So I think that's what I'm going to do and just chill out.
So fun. So fun. I love getting those sneak peeks into what are people up to on the day we record. So awesome. Let's get into this. Okay. So as our resident organizing expert, you say that disorganization goes deeper than piles of paper on the counter, dishes in the sink, or an overflowing closet. It's just a symptom of a bigger issue. Tell us a little more about that.
So I like to pretend I'm a therapist. Let's just put it out there. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I realized very early on when I started working with people, even before this was a business that I just would like go over and help friends, that it really, when I would talk to them about like, kind of how did you get here? There was always like something bigger, and it was always whether they didn't know what they were doing. So there was like this feeling of just uncertainty or this fear or guilt. And I started really identifying just patterns from people and recognizing that, you know, it isn't enough to just treat the symptom, like going to the doctor and saying, I have a headache, and okay, we're going to treat the, give you Tylenol or Motrin. But after a while, if you start to see things as a pattern, maybe we need to like look a little bit deeper and do a little bit more of a diagnostic to say, okay, why is this happening in the first place? And once we can get to the root of that, that's when we can start really kind of fixing the problem.
Especially when it comes up over and over again. Like you've done that intervention. Oh, we can't keep a system in place. That's
Absolutely.
your signal. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Everyone, I'm sure, has some period of time during their year or their month where, things get a little out of hand, you get it back in control. But it's this pattern of like, why can I never seem to sustain a system of organization that's really like, there's something at the root of that you have to get curious about.
Absolutely. And I try to break it down into like two different camps where I look at what I call like chronic clutter, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're a hoarder. I mean, like that's a whole other category and episode, right? So you have your chronic clutter, which are continual patterns of behavior. And then you have what I call situational clutter, which is the majority of people in this world. And they're the majority of my clients and probably the majority of your listeners, I'm busy. I'm a busy mom. I'm busy in my career. I'm doing a lot of things. And in this particular season, at this particular time, things are piling up, literally or figuratively. And what's the best system or strategy for me to navigate that?
Beautiful.
And once we can kind of name it in one of those two camps, it makes it a lot easier to A, to digest, and then B, to say, okay, so what do we need to do to fix this? What type of fix are we looking at?
And so what's the difference? Do the situational clutter people know how to get it back under control when they clear space to do that?
Well, yes and no. So situational clutter could be something like anything from it's Christmas time. So my guest room is like piled with unwrapped gifts and wrapping paper. So it looks like a cyclone hit it, but we know that it's just here for like a very short temporary period, right? So, okay, so do we need a temporary little fix, staging area? Is there a solution? Do we need to put some storage in a closet or a guest, a basement or whatever? That's like one example of it. But situational clutter could also be, I live in a small space. We just had a baby. So now or here's even a better one. We're in COVID. Right. And now we're all here. We're all doing school, work, meals in under one roof. So I'm faced in this situation where if the situation wouldn't be happening, this probably wouldn't be an issue. What do I do to navigate the situation? It's not that I don't know how to be organized or I struggle with opening my mail on a routine basis.
Yes.
That to me would be something more chronic. Not that it's a life-shattering problem, but like a chronic clutter would be like, I have this problem about I buy stuff and I don't wear it. I have this problem of when I get bored, I do this. Those are more chronic clutter patterns.
Yes.
Versus a situational, which is I'm faced with clutter because of something that's happening outside of my
So interesting. And I love that you brought up small space because I've become obsessed with this idea of how much of the clutter problem that people have is driven by a mismatch between the size of their space and the amount of stuff. Like if you don't have a lot, right? If you don't have a lot of space and you don't have storage, what exactly are you going to do? Right. So I always say like, there's a place for everything and everything is in that place, then you never have clutter.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because my husband was born and raised in Manhattan in an apartment.
Yeah.
And so there's no garage, there's no attic, there's no basement, there's no guest room. There's like every space is utilized probably for like double duty. And so there wasn't room for clutter. Like you just didn't have it. You had a defined space for toys or whatever you were going to have. And that was just kind of how he grew up. And we live in the suburbs and, we live in a modest house, but I live in an area where there's a lot of space and people probably have more space than they need. And I see a lot of waste and a lot of clutter because it's easy to just
throw it,
shut the door, not look at it.
That's
where when you are in a small space, you have no choice but to make a decision. You're either going to see it and it's going to be there, or you're going to have to just make a decision to get rid of it or, find another solution.
Yes.
Where when you have the luxury of space, whether that is a garage, attic, guest room, playroom, you can accumulate. And then by the time you want to get to it, you are looking at this big mountain because you've been able to procrastinate for X amount of time.
It's totally true. And that's the paradox. That's the opposite of what I was saying, right? But that's a very interesting flip because, I grew up in a smaller house than I live in now. It was not cluttered because my mom was very fastidious about that. But many times when I was in small homes or go into them now, it's like, there's just not a place to put this stuff. So it's kind of stacked up. Whereas I feel like I've got a lot of storage, things can be tucked away. And I talk about that often as like a blessing in this home that I can get it out of sight neatly where it belongs. And there's still kind of like this clean aesthetic around me, which is just the way I'm wired, super important to me. Like I think better when there's not a lot of clutter. Is that true for everyone? Do we all think better?
I mean, listen, I can't speak for everybody, but studies will show that is something that is really important. And I was doing a focus group. It's not like a big, huge scientific study, but I'm doing a project about Enneagram and clutter. And so I did a focus group. There was like about 184 people in the study that took this assessment or whatever. I don't want to call it a quiz. And it had a whole host of questions about kind of patterns and behaviors and how they handle things. And despite, a lot of different answers based on Enneagram type, 90+% of the people said that if they have a cluttered physical space around them, it really impacted their perception, their productivity, and their mindset.
And focus, yes.
And focus. So there really is something to be said for what those physical distractions, the bigger impact that it has on us. And just to your earlier point about having space is a great thing if it's utilized well. And I did this article like years and years ago all about when too much space isn't a good thing. And I think it's about anything. It's about making sure that you're not like using that as an excuse to just, like I
just
said,
throw this over here because there's room for it. I'll deal later. I can shut that door because we don't go in that room. I can see where that could become a hiding place for.
And it happens for all of us. Don't get me wrong. There have been plenty of times where I have said, I'm just going to put this here and I'll deal with it later.
Yes.
And that's fine. But it's then you need to make the time to come and deal with it later.
And you have to actually do what you said you were going to do. Yes. So this is such a great topic for us today because I know when I am interviewing women before they come into our core coaching program, we're talking about what are the things that are really weighing you down, and organization at home comes up all the time. So I know we're on a hot topic, and I know physical clutter is what most people think about. It's the piles of mail, it's the Amazon returns that haven't been done yet, it's the clothes I bought that I'm not wearing, kids' school stuff, right? All those things are what we talk about. But you say there's 3 types of clutter. There's physical clutter. What are the other 2?
So physical clutter, like you said, is the stuff that everyone conjures up. Laundry, mail, dishes, the Amazon returns, all the things. Emotional clutter is really about what I kind of pinpoint into 2 different categories, like guilt or fear. It's that like, what if I got rid of it? And that could be something as benign as mail. Like, what if I need this? How do I retrieve it? It could be mom guilt of my kid made this. I have to keep it. And I would feel like a bad mom, or what if I need it? Or it could be guilt of I spent a lot of money on this X jeans, shoes, whatever, and I'm never going to wear them. It doesn't fit me. I don't like it anymore, but I feel guilty. Yes. So emotional clutter is all of that stuff that's weighing us down. It's that little voice inside us.
It's like the why. You're giving us the clue as to why we're holding on to this physical stuff. And it's caused by our emotional attachment or to it. That's interesting.
Yes. Yes. And then the 3rd type is what I call calendar clutter. And calendar clutter is interesting because it has to do with that either inability to say no. It has to do with overscheduling yourself or maybe the people in your life that you're responsible for, whether it's your kids or maybe you have an aging parent and you're taking care of them. So it's all of that stuff, as well as maybe not using your time efficiently. So sometimes it is like a time management thing. Maybe we are wasting more time than we should on social media, or not really being, diligent with our calendar in terms of like, avoiding distraction when we can. So that's really how I look at calendar clutter and starting to identify where is your dominant type. And when I always like in my book and when I talk about it, I use a model of like 3 concentric circles because they really are intertwined. And sometimes people will be like, well, I have all of those, but there's usually a dominant one that where you're listening to that and go, yeah, that's me. I really struggle with this. And once again, going back to the why, once you can start to identify this is where I struggle, then you can look at the strategies that are going to make sense for you. Because if somebody really struggles with emotional clutter, my approach is going to be very different. And, it's then somebody that just says,
I didn't have time to deal with it.
Yeah. Correct.
I hear you, because if you are coaching someone through, I don't know, a basement clean out, and you're like, well, just get rid of it. And they're like, oh, but this is from, my daughter made this in kindergarten and this was my great grandmother's. And like that all becomes the block on why they can't actually execute a curation process, right? So, the antidote to clutter is curating and really choosing what's going to stay and what's going to go with a new set of rules. And that intervention itself, like that project to get it cleaned up can be hamstrung, I think, if you have a lot of emotional ties to the stuff you've been holding on to.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, everyone has to do it at their own rate. And it has to be a pain point for you.
Yes.
I could walk into somebody's house or look at somebody's space, and to them, they might say, this is really, really bothering me. And I'm like looking at them like, it's really not that bad.
Right.
But if it's a pain point for them, then that's something that needs to be fixed. On the flip side, I could walk in and be like, oh my gosh, there's like 10 piles of paper. And I don't mean it from a judgment standpoint, but to me, like that's all I see. And I could feel like the stress mounting on my, my own like neck tightening. But if it's not for them, then they don't have the buy-in to want to fix it. So it's a matter of kind of meeting people where they are and saying, what is it that you really want to improve or fix? Or, even if it's not for you, if it's, I'm struggling with this with my spouse, my child, my whatever. And that's why I always say to people, they're like, my mom is really, I want to get an organizer for my mom or my sister or whatever.
Mom thinks it's fine. Right.
But, and I say, you have to have that person owning the process, because until you empower that person to say, yes, this is something I want to work on, that's when the transformation. And I think it's the same for anything. You could fill in the blank with your community of people, with career or working out or eating right. We all know what we're supposed to do. Or if we don't, we choose to go to those experts to like seek advice. But if somebody's just telling you, I think you should do this, you're like,
no, thanks. Right. That's interesting. Ever feel like instead of you running your week is running you? I know, we've all been there. Too often it feels like time is racing by and we're just struggling to keep up. But listen, it doesn't have to be this way. Let me help you take control of your calendar once and for all. Get my downloadable guide and learn how you can align your time with your priorities and get a handle on your never-ending to-do list. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/calendar to download your guide and get control over your calendar starting today. I think that's interesting because, I think sometimes people talk about the clutter or the disorganization in their home, and yet if you try to problem solve, they're not really ready to implement those solutions. So there's this kind of gap between I've identified there's a challenge, I'm not comfortable. I know I should probably do something about this, but I'm not quite uncomfortable enough yet to make a change. And I mean, I'm using the word intervention. That's probably too strong. But
I think it's
when you stage that, right? When you have that, because I think of it as the project up front of like, let's get this stuff dealt with. But then there's this process to keep it that way, right? Totally. So when let's say you have a successful intervention, right? You individually go through your house and you get everything in order and you feel so good. Why is it so hard to keep up with it?
Well, there's a couple reasons. And I think sometimes people overcomplicate the whole process. Like they make the system too micro, too complicated, where, it could be something as, and I'll just use this. So when I redid my laundry room / mud room, this was a couple years ago, I was talking to my contractor about kind of what I wanted, and I wanted to have, like a cubby area type thing. And then I was looking for what to do with shoes. And he's like, do you want little shoe cubbies? And I was like, no, I don't.
No shoe cubbies.
No shoe cubbies, because I know my humans, and
especially
they're not going to
the shoe cubbies with the boxes with lids. Who does that?
Yes.
No, bins, shoe bins for the kids.
Yeah. So I said, we have a bench with like some open area where they could put like stuff. And then I have like, because I live in the country and I have like a farmhousey house. And so I said, I want to have, so I just have like an old reclaimed bin that I put like flip-flops.
Yes, ditto. Totally the same.
So it's super simple, and people are like, wait, what? And I go, you have to make it a simple system. So,
Laurie, we're like long lost sisters here, because I have shoe baskets, which are called the shoe bins. I don't know how that happened, but they're
That's
baskets.
Fine. Yeah.
And they're at the entrances, like they're by the places where people take their shoes off, because the kids run in and out of like the backyard door or the door to the driveway, or like there's 3 doors, right? And so I have shoe bins. And so if there is a shoe anywhere, if we find a shoe anywhere, I just toss in one of those bins. And then you never have to look anywhere except those 3 places. Like, where are the shoes? They're definitively in one of those baskets. Go look, right? Because I'm not going to put it anywhere else, but that's easy. If I had to go find pairs and boxes, no, it would never happen. It would never happen.
Yeah. So I think it's about keeping a simple system.
Yes.
That is going to make the ease of retrieval, because I'm all about the ease of retrieval. I always tell people, think about the purpose isn't what to put it away. And a lot of times people are so consumed with I have to get it away. I have to get it away.
Interesting.
But really the goal is, when you need it, are you going to know where to go to get it? So I always try to put something away with the ease of retrieval. When it's time to get that paper, when it's time to find your kids' school pictures for a project, when it's time to find the snow pants that you use a few times a year, are you going to know where you put them? It's not about just putting them away so it's out of sight, out of mind.
Okay, everybody listening, pause, ask yourself, do you know where the school pictures are from every year? Can you in 3 seconds say where they are? And do you know where the snow pants are if you live in an area of the country that gets snow, right? Those are great questions, because for anything like that you don't need all the time, it's not in daily use, it's so easy to be like, I don't know, I put it anywhere. And then it's time to get it that one time a year, and you're like, it's going to take me half a day, forget it. I think that's really a good benchmark to hold up, is like, can I recall where it would be if I needed to get it? And is it, do I have to climb through 12 cabinets to get there? Is probably not a good idea either, right? We want stuff within arm's reach. Okay.
Yeah. So that's really what I try to do when I'm thinking through a system for anybody in any space. Like, you could fill in the blank. And I think it's a great thing, especially for any moms out there with younger kids, because I'm all about empowering. And I know your community has a lot of women that, are juggling a lot in their lives. And the more that we can empower other people in our families to own it, and you not be the bottleneck. I think for a lot of women, they wind up being the bottleneck, because that's just how it's
control.
Control is a huge issue. And then if we're not setting up these, and it's not that it's on us, but if the system isn't set up in a way that's sustainable for everybody, then it's hard for it to maintain. So kind of going back to your original question, is you want to make it easy for you to contain the sustainability. If you make it a really complicated, we have to do a 10-step thing as opposed to just the shoe bin, then it's really hard. But if you know that you put the snacks for the kids on a reachable shelf in the pantry, then they can then go and grab it, put it away.
Yes. Let's talk about staging. So you mentioned this word before, and it's a word I use a lot. It's a principle I use. Like, it's kind of related to batching. If you're listening and you don't know what this is, like if I know that I'm going to have some returns to do and I physically have to go out of the house to do it, then all of those go in one place at maybe the trunk of my car or maybe the area in our family entry. And it's like, these are staged because I'm going to grab all of it at once and go do the returns. Talk a little bit about that principle, but how can that help in sustaining systems?
Okay, so I just call it zoning.
Yep.
Same thing. Okay, so it's just creating a zone for that. So I think it's important that having zones for whatever it is.
Like library books be a good example.
Library books is a huge one. Kids' instruments is another one.
It's a good one.
But sports equipment, all of that, again, having those zones it's important because it defines where stuff should go. So it removes that decision making. I think a lot of us struggle with organization because of decision fatigue. And as women, we are already trying to figure out everything from what to wear, to what am I going to do, to how am I going to get the kids from point A to point B, all of these things. What am I going to make for dinner? Like all of these things that are weighing us down, that knowing like, where should I put the returns that I got this online and it doesn't fit? It's just one more thing on our to-do list. So if you can just know that you have this space, whether that is in your laundry room or a corner of your garage or by your front door, whatever.
It doesn't matter.
Makes sense. It doesn't matter, but just having a space for that. And when I talk to people about creating these zones or staging, it's let's look through the categories that fit into our life, not just the ones that we think, like the ones that are obvious, but those ones that pop up, because those are the ones that become our miscellaneous junk drawer of sorts.
Yes. So good. I think that notion of zones where anything that's, you know where to find it. And then especially for me, it seems the things that require me to leave my house, but I'm not going yet. Like I can't execute it immediately.
Yes.
That's the holy grail. And so this concept of staging for me was like, I can't take the library books back until they're all ready, but I don't want to be running all over the house looking for them. So they have to live somewhere.
Yes.
And I love that zone idea. How do we get kids in on this? Give us like one good tip to get kids in the mix.
Okay. Gosh, one good tip.
I know. Well, there's probably 400, but let's talk one.
Okay, so one good tip is go to my website. There's a free resource on there about a 30-day kids organizing project that I did with my own kids when they were little, like a few years ago, and it was great. But I think letting them own the process. As parents, present company included, it's our natural inclination. We want to get it done quickly. We want to get it done, I'm air quoting, right, because we want it done our way. And it's a lot easier in the short term to just do it ourselves. And so, I also have another tip, actually.
Okay.
So I know you said one, but I have another one.
I'll give you a bonus.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, can I have a bonus?
Sure.
So the more that you can just start to empower them with little things is great. The other thing, and this one is probably what I should have led with, is be really specific with kids. This one is huge. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they say, I told my child to go upstairs and clean their room, and all they did was shove their stuff under their bed or in their closet. And I said, okay, well, again, what does clean the room mean to a 7-year-old? Right. What does that mean? So just like as adults, we get overwhelmed, and overwhelm is one of the biggest pitfalls for lack of organization and clutter buildup. So do our kids. They're not immune to that. And I think the more that you could be very specific and say, I'd like you to go upstairs and put all your dirty clothes in the hamper, or I'd like you to go upstairs and put your books back on the shelf, or your toys in the toy bin. Very specific, small, actionable strategies that will help them, as opposed to being a broad generalization like go and clean your room. Or do this. I think that's huge.
That's brilliant, because the kids can't read our minds. So when we don't paint a picture of what done looks like, they think they did it, in their mind, they're like so proud of themselves. So I love that notion of specificity. That's a great tip. So you mentioned your website. We'll link it in the show notes, but go ahead and give them verbally the website.
Oh, sure. It's simply the letter B like boy, organize.com. And everything is there.
And there's like a lot of downloads, y'all. So when you get there, you'll pick the one that this one is there, but there are a lot of others. And
lots of free resources.
Yes, you have a book. So the book is called Hot Mess, A Practical Guide to Getting Organized. Where can we find the book?
You can find it anywhere books are sold, Barnes & Nobles, Amazon. I'm a big supporter of local independent bookstores. So ask your local bookstore if they have it. If they don't, I'm sure they can get it. But yes, it's available on all the major platforms.
Fantastic. So, you've got checklists available. You have a book you can go and get. And then if you want to go even further, Laura, you have some programming that they could look into and they can find out more about that on the website.
Yeah. And so from the website, you can link to my podcast, which I have tons and lots of episodes there. And so you can find that. Obviously, you got podcast listeners here, so they can totally find that. But I also, if people need more hands-on, some people really, even with the best of intentions and listening to shows and reading books and all the things, some people just need that extra accountability of having somebody there. And I have curated an amazing network of professional organizers from all over. So if you go to my website and you go into the resources section and you click in Find an Organizer, there are tons of organizers from all over the country that all specialize in different things that you can connect up with somebody to come in and help you navigate if that's something that you feel like you need a little bit of extra.
So good. I bet there's people out there feeling a little tingly about how exciting that would be to see all of their things organized in their home.
Yes.
Okay, you ready for a speed round?
I am ready.
Perfect. All right, first question. What makes you feel brilliant?
When I mentor other people and I'm able to give them something that maybe worked for me and they have their own light bulb moment, I feel really good about that.
Awesome. What's your favorite time-saving or productivity hack?
Okay, keeping a digital to-do list on my phone, hands down. I keep nothing in my brain. As soon as a thought comes in, I brain dump it, and I'm all digital because I like to have things with me at all times.
No clutter. What have you learned to say no to?
This is a work in progress for me because I will say, in the spirit of transparency, calendar clutter is kind of my default. I really have gotten much better at realizing like what's mine to do and what's not. So as an 8, anybody that knows the Enneagram, like I'm a leader by nature. I like to volunteer and do things. And I've come to realize like I don't need to lead every committee. I can pick and choose and let somebody else do something.
That's awesome.
So life will go on.
What's one dream you're chasing these days?
So I would say professionally, I'm working on this new project for our clutter in the Enneagram. So I would say my biggest goal right now is to take all of the research and the framework that I've been working on and curate that into my next book.
Awesome. And what's the song? You
heard it here first, people.
What's the song that you turn on when you need to get in the zone?
Okay, so I was thinking about this. It's questions like this that are really hard for me. I don't know why. Like, ask me any other question, I will tell you. These are tough questions because I don't have like necessarily one go-to song, but I would say that I'm a huge Ed Sheeran fan. So anytime I like listen to anything Ed Sheeran, like more of the upbeat stuff, like I find that it gets me like motivated and just like kind of like sets a good tone for me.
I totally agree with you on his. There's
Is that a fair enough answer?
It's
that I don't
totally
have
specific enough. Yes.
Is
there's
that
something
okay?
Like psychologically effective about the beats in his music. Like I was telling my husband that I'm like, there is something he is doing. It's like psychology that goes like a worm into your brain. It's really good stuff.
Yeah. My daughter's a musician and she's like all into like music and artists and all this. And so she would be like, not that she's not an Ed Sheeran fan, but she would be like right there with the song. I'm just more like, I just know it makes me feel good. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Laurie, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I learned a lot. I got some new tips I can go apply, especially specificity with my children so that they can help keep things in order and systems that are at their level. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, that was so practical and useful. I am confident you learned something today that you can take away and implement in your life that's going to make a real difference. And I try to do that in each and every episode of the show to ground it in really pragmatic ideas that you can take away and implement. So next week on the show, I am back with even more practical content. I'm answering a question that I get asked all the time once people learn about my habits, and that is, how can I read more? So next week, I'm breaking down what I do to keep up with my reading habit, and I'm going to share those ideas with you in next week's episode. So till then, my friends, come follow along on Instagram. We're at brilliant_balance, or you can follow me at cskolnicki, and you'll kind of stay up to date on all the things happening between now and next week's episode. Until then, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.